speak for more time than I'd expected. But I won't come between you and the speaker. India-Russia relations have several important characteristics. If I have to mention a few, I would say there's consensus, one, in both countries, cutting across party lines to have good relations and priority relations. Two, there is no clash of interest between the two countries, and neither sees the strength of the other as a clashing with its interests. The third aspect, if I tell you that there is trust and confidence, and you will only have to, these are vague words, they look, but when I come to the next 3 or 4 points that come to my mind, you will understand what I mean. And I will come straight to cooperation in the sectors of space and nuclear field, about which much is not shared and cannot be shared. But it's a fact that that's one sector in which the two countries have worked very closely. The next is defense cooperation. You read all about it, you know about it, and there is much more. Science and technology is another sector in which the two countries have worked extremely closely. The BrahMos is only one example, but there has been a long cooperation between the two countries. Terrorism is something that both countries have suffered from and worked closely in combating it. There are other aspects which bring us together. Multipolarity, Eurasian security. You know, Asian security doesn't have what happens in the West, defining of the kind that happens. But no security system here would work in Asia till you take the interest of India and Russia. Well, there is cooperation in the field of culture and various regions working together. But I don't have to list everything for you. I know that many are concerned about some aspects of our relations. One is the growing cooperation between Pakistan and Russia. They're in the process of selling 4 helicopters. I think we are strong enough to not to be worried about 4 helicopters. And here I'd like to make one point. 20th century relationship is different from the 21st century. I think we are mature enough. We don't have to look at exclusivity. That was the hallmark of the 20th century. Today, relations with different countries are working much more in a diversified manner. And I will leave it at that because you have much more, you will hear much more on this aspect. On Afghanistan, again, we worked very closely in the past. We continue to work together, and there are differences on how to tackle, say, the Taliban. But I think they shouldn't worry us too much. And I strongly believe that if two friends, if you always think alike, if you don't if you agree on everything, there has to be, it's suspicious. So there has to be some, but that is not a reason I'm giving for no. I think these are points which have to be discussed. It affects us adversely, and we have to discuss with them. The third aspect is the relationship between growing relationship between China and Russia. You know, there has been turbulence in this relationship since the 17th century. And today we don't have time to discuss it. Today they're working very closely, and if I had time, I would have liked to speak to you about it, but that we'll do in some other. But there's one thing that we are all agreed, that the proud Russian nation would never for long like to be a secondary power in a relationship with any country. Well, I think this is what I'm trying to give you is like a trailer to a film, because now I would like to hand over to a person who I think is very competent to speak on this subject. Why have we requested Ambassador Rahul to speak on this subject? He has served in East Europe. He has worked in the Prime Minister's office dealing with Russia, and I know it firsthand because I was ambassador in Moscow when he was in the Prime Minister's office. He has been ambassador to Moscow and is currently the convener of the National Security Advisory Board. So with these words, I will request Ambassador Rahul to enlighten us on this important subject.
I think I don't require a mic. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your kind words, and thank you also for providing the setting to this discussion that we are having today. Discussion on India-Russia relations is always very timely, but particularly so now. As you know, our Prime Minister visited Russia in the first week of June last month. And it's one in a tradition, an unbroken tradition of annual summits that we have sustained since the year 2000. It was a great visit. Everyone saw this warm cordiality between the Prime Minister and President Putin. The joint statement said everything that you wanted said in such a joint statement. There was a good business-to-business interaction, and the visit was followed by a meeting of the Military Technical Cooperation Joint Commission. There are a number of decisions that were taken on defense cooperation. And yet, at the end of all this, as Ambassador Lamba said, the question persistently continues to be asked, where is India-Russia relations headed? And the answer very often is that it is headed downwards. That the strategic partnership that we declared in the year 2000 no longer is fraying at the edges, let's put it that way. So that continues to be a narrative. I want to put up on the screen here a few of the prevalent narratives that about India and about Russia and about India-Russia relations, which you persistently come across in the country today. One, which again, Ambassador Lamba hinted at this, that the political content of the relationship is diluting, that our strategic interests are diverging, and we do not have the 21st century relationship as vibrant, or the second decade of the 21st century relationship as vibrant as before. Two, that in Russia's current geopolitics, India is losing its importance. It is not as important to Russia anymore. Three, our own global profile has expanded greatly, and so you don't require the support of Russia as much as we required in the past. And finally, I think all of us fall victim to what we see in the media, primarily the Western media, diminishing Russia, demonizing Putin. I mean, Russia is today now the hacker-in-chief of the world. At the same time, you have the narrative which says that Russia is weakening, Russia's economy is tanking. While its economy is tanking and it's weakening, it still constitutes the greatest existential threat to the greatest superpower in the world. So, you know, you have a number of these narratives which all of us are fed on because we are fed by the English language media. And that affects our thinking, the thinking of our own public, thinking of our media, thinking of analysts on Russia. And all of these feed into the narrative about the India-Russia relationship. Now, I'm going to focus mainly on India-Russia relations today, but I think it is necessary to set the scene, the external scene, to see where Russia is coming from, post-Cold War Russia is coming from. We know where we have, what we have done post-Cold War, and we know our domestic and external perspectives. But a quick look at Russia's external perspectives. As you know, post-Cold War, Russia faced political disarray, economic chaos, social tensions. There were law and order problems. The reach of the federal government across the country was a problem. It really was a country which was on the verge of collapse, one might say. Externally, from Russia, I mean, what Russia believes that externally, the world, the West took advantage of this weakness. One of the manifestations was the rapid advance of NATO. Now, at the time when Germany was being reunified, it has been said very often, it's been written about also, President Gorbachev was given an assurance by the West apparently that NATO would not move even half an inch towards Soviet borders. Well, it didn't happen, as you can see from this, the extent to which NATO advanced rapidly to Russia's borders. You also see the NATO missile, the ballistic missile defense deployments to the west of Russia. It was supposed to be against missile threats from rogue countries, but you can see the extent to which Russian territory, Russia sees their territory as being threatened by that. And then there were these color revolutions, the so-called color revolutions in Georgia in 2003 and Georgia and Ukraine. A very sensitive part of Russia, because this is what you might call the soft underbelly of Russia, leads into the oil-producing region, and also, if you see further, you see Georgia. Georgia actually abuts a whole set of Caucasian regions in Russia which have been beset by Islamic extremism. So Russia is very sensitive about talk, or has been very sensitive about talk of Georgia and Ukraine joining NATO. And then, as you go towards 2015, Russia saw threats from the West, from Afghanistan. They kept talking about this US and UK intelligence threatening Russia through export of extremists, terrorists from coming in from Syria and Iraq, trying to infiltrate them into Russia through the porous Central Asian border. So these are the various threats that Russia perceives. Now I want to clarify, these are Russian perspectives, the way Russia looks at the outside world, or the way Russia explains the outside world to itself and to the world. There are different perspectives, of course, we must remember, because there are people from other countries who may be listening to this or watching this. The Baltic countries have a completely different perspective on this. They see Russia as flexing its muscle to reimpose its military and cultural dominance on them. You have countries of Central Europe, which were part of the Soviet bloc. I have served in two of them myself, who have also, whose perspective is to make sure that Russia does not regain its old dominance. But from Russia's perspective, when President Putin came to power, his idea was to restore Russian dignity, to restore Russian pride, and, to borrow a phrase from a later decade, to make Russia great again. I mean, that was very much Putin's objective. So, Russia responded to what it saw as this external threat by rebuilding Russian military threat and buoying Europe. Now, there was a period when Europe was trying to also establish itself as an independent pole away from the American shadow, and there was a growing closeness between Europe and Russia. Europe wanted Russia's cheap energy sources and natural resources. Russia wanted Europe's technology and investment. So there was a budding relationship, which of course was nipped in the bud in 2003 with the invasion of Iraq. Then there was this Estonia cyber attack in 2007. I put a number of question marks in it because everyone knows this as a denial of service attack, which actually paralyzed Estonian life for about a week or 10 days. But while everyone believes it was Russia that did it, and Russia has not taken great pains to deny it either. Till date, it has not been, you have not been able to prove official Russian involvement in this. But it was seen as Russia's signal that if you offend Russia's sensitivities, we have many methods other than military to deal with you. And I think the point was effectively made. The point was made also in the case of the Georgian War, where again, the point that Russia was seeking to make was, and this shows the Russian advancement into Georgia, and at the end of it, Russia sort of liberated Abkhazia and South Ossetia and recognized them as independent. But the point Russia was seeking to make was that, you know, a closer big power is more important than a distant, stronger power supporting you. So these are all Russian efforts at, or Mr. President Putin's effort at reimposing Russia's authority in its region. And then, of course, you had the so-called annexation or accession of Crimea, when street protests overthrew the government in Ukraine, which then talked about joining NATO and the European Union. Russia acted quickly and engineered, there's no other word for it, an accession campaign in Crimea. It was easy because Crimea was 90% Russian speaking, or about 90% Russian speaking. Not quite 90%, a little less than that anyway. So the accession of Crimea was completed. So these are the various actions that Russia took in its own image to sort of restore its authority over its region. Now, the sanctions that followed it aimed at isolating Russia politically, to impose economic sanctions, restricting financing to Russia, denial of technology to Russia. But since the sanctions were relatively by a few countries, essentially the G7 countries, Russia was able to, crucially for Russia, the BRICS countries did not join the sanctions, and therefore its activism in BRICS continued. G20 was not able to exclude Russia because of BRICS and a few other countries. So its activism in international affairs could not be curbed totally. And then, of course, the Iran nuclear deal, Russia played an important role, also acknowledged by the West as well. It was a sort of guarantor to Iran of Western intentions, and after the nuclear deal, it played a very important role. Russia transported 11,000 kilos of enriched uranium out of Iran, which is something that both logistically and politically a few other countries would have been able to do. And we know about the Syria military operations at a time when President Assad was probably about to fall, but at a time also when the rebel forces were sort of acting at cross purposes. President Putin took the opportunity of entering Syria, and Russia has placed itself in a position where it will play an important role in the political settlement in Syria. Similarly, it inserted itself into the Afghan peace process, and Ambassador Lamba referred to it as well. In energy politics, Russia has been very active. It is the second largest exporter of oil. It is has the largest natural gas. Yeah.
Messages and all those.
No.
Take
no
it from both.
But yeah. Where were we? Yeah, energy. So in global energy politics, Russia is important, and you can't get away from its importance. Even countries like Saudi Arabia, which have other perspectives on Syria, have been talking constantly to Russia in order to adjust their energy politics. And there's a whole lot of other dynamics in the energy scene. If it comes up in the discussion, we can talk about it. And of course, the China embrace, again, Ambassador Lamba referred to it. The whole process of the sanctions regime willy-nilly made Russia go into a warmer Chinese embrace and perhaps wanted to. We'll talk about that a little bit later as part of the issues in India-Russia relations. So we come to India-Russia relations, which are the main topic of the conversation today. India was the first country, or rather Russia was the first country with which India formally declared a strategic partnership. And these were the days before every second relationship of ours got described as a strategic partnership. But the strategic partnership was launched by President Putin during his visit to India in the year 2000. India was one of the first countries President Putin visited after he became president. And I'd like to read the elements that President Putin saw as elements of our relationship in an address to our Indian Parliament in 2000. He said, of course, he said that India's Russian and Indian geopolitical political interests coincide. He said the Kashmir issue should be resolved bilaterally between India and Pakistan. There should be unconditional respect for the line of control, no external interference. No matter how Russia's relations with other countries develop, be it Asian or other countries, there would never be alternatives to relations with India. Russia fully supported India's stand on international terrorism. In view of the commonality of Indian and Russian interests, they could work together on nuclear issues without contradicting the interests of international security. The most important consequence of the strategic partnership and President Putin's visit was the impulse it gave to our defense cooperation. That was a period when India's purchase involved all arms of the armed forces, the Su-30 MKI fighter, a range of helicopters, T-90 tanks, artillery, armored vehicles, missile systems, stealth frigates, submarines, etc., etc. Now, to fast forward to the period from 2009 to 2014, there was a distinct, you can call it a lull, or you can call it a slackening of the partnership. Essentially, it followed the India-US nuclear deal, but more than the India-US nuclear deal, the promise of enhanced defense cooperation with the US and the enhanced nuclear cooperation with the US. I'd like to say here that it's not as much the US developments that affected the India-Russia relationship as a feeling that India was going slow with the ongoing initiatives with Russia. Nuclear cooperation with Russia slackened. Defense cooperation with Russia slackened during this period. Now, much of it was due to actually an atrophy of government that all of us know happened during the latter half of the UPA government. Decision making became slack, but it was seen by Russia as being influenced by US pressure. And what I think affected Russia most of all, and it is not talked about, actually it's not much known here, is during India's tenure in the UN Security Council as a non-permanent member, some of the stands that we took were seen by Russia to be very clearly influenced by American pressure. The most wrong of them, the wrong decision that we took was voting with the Western countries on Syria, on a Chapter 7 resolution, where Russia eventually, of course, imposed a veto, but this would have been essentially into the resolution that would have engineered an accelerated regime change in Russia, in Syria, I'm sorry. It was a stand that actually went against our position on Syria over a long period of time. It's a stand that we have amended subsequently. But events like these, and the fact that, you know, the 2009-2014 UPA 2 cast off the left parties, it was seen as not only pro-American but America influenced against India-Russia relations. Now this was something that was corrected very strongly by the new government. The new government actually, Russia saw with some trepidation because it thought that it was also not as committed to India-Russia relations, but Prime Minister Modi took the first opportunity. You know about this July 2014 at Fortaleza at the BRICS summit. It's an oft-quoted comment actually, more in Russia than in India, where he said that, you know, if you ask any Indian who is our best friend, every child in India knows that it is Russia because it has stood by us in the most difficult situations. It's often quoted in Russia. But then India took a very measured stand on Crimea. In fact, when Prime Minister Modi was asked by Fareed Zakaria in an interview about why India has not criticized Russian actions in Ukraine, he said something to the equivalent of, let he who has not sinned cast the first stone. And External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj, standing next to John Kerry at the joint press conference, very clearly said that we are not going to subscribe to American sanctions on Russia. So there was a new momentum imparted to the relationship. At the summit in December 2014, we announced this joint manufacture of Ka-226 helicopters from Russia as the first Make in India project in the defense sector. Nuclear energy cooperation was reopened again, and there was in fact a strategic vision signed for about a dozen nuclear power plants to be set up in 2 decades, involving generation of over 13,000 megawatts of power. Importantly, the two leaders agreed that we have to strengthen other pillars of the relationship. Hydrocarbons is something that Prime Minister mentioned as an area of focus. Nuclear energy, of course, we said again already. And some economic initiatives were announced also in order to strengthen this pillar, which is one of the biggest pillars of the India-Russia relationship still. Since then, there has been considerable progress. The KA-226 helicopter project has actually progressed from announcement to an intergovernmental agreement to a joint venture signing. By the standards of our defense project, this is a super accelerated progress. But we've also had other good developments. The stealth frigates, which are going to be now manufactured progressively in India with transfer of technology and transfer of capacity to India, refit of submarines, which similarly with these innovative ideas. We are now discussing the advanced S-400 air defense system acquisition from Russia. We are addressing this very vexed issue of after-sales product support by a series of measures, including long-term in setting up repair and maintenance workshops in India and transfer of technology to manufacture some critical components in India. And recently, at the Military Technical Cooperation Joint Commission meeting in Russia, after the PM's visit, we have also started this Science and Technology Commission in order to discuss how more cutting-edge technologies can be transferred from Russia to India. On nuclear power, we two Kudankulam atomic power plants, of course, are already on stream. 2 more have been contracted for earlier, and in this June summit, 2 more have been, an agreement has been signed on 2 more. So we are making progress. We are making progress on localization as well. We are making progress on cooperation in the nuclear fuel cycle. Our hydrocarbon companies, again, great progress has taken place in the last couple of years. Over $6 billion have been invested by our hydrocarbon companies in Russia. And equally importantly, Rosneft, Russia's oil major, has invested in India 86,000 crores of rupees, so $13 billion. It is actually India's largest FDI. And they've taken over SR Oil, which is India's second largest refined oil refinery. They've taken over their retail outlet. They now control actually 9% of India's retail oil outlets. And I read recently that in the first half of 2017, India has bought over 1 million tons of crude oil from Russia, so over 20 times the annual figure over the last several years. Enhancing bilateral trade, again, there have been some steps in that direction. We have started working, discussing more intensively the international north-south transport corridor, which is international transport corridor, which can be a game changer by shortening the distance and reducing the freight between India and Russia by about 50%. We've also started talking about a free trade agreement with the Eurasian Economic Union, which is Russia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Armenia, and Kyrgyzstan. We have some measures to reduce transaction costs of trade, like a green corridor of custom, trade in national currencies. A number of these initiatives are at various stages of discussion. Tata Power is at the moment in an advanced stage of deciding on an investment in coal in eastern Siberia. We also recently set up a $1 billion investment fund, a joint investment fund for investing in infrastructure projects in India. So, you have this entire range of developments in the last 3 years, which should normally advertise a relationship in its prime. And yet, the narrative is of a relationship on a downward spiral, and the reason for that are these, which, again, Ambassador Lamba touched on various aspects of it. The relationship with Pakistan, which includes arms sales, joint military exercises, of course, particularly a joint military exercise that took place barely a week after Uri incensed us greatly. The Russian reluctance to mention cross-border terrorism at the BRICS summit was another indication which we saw of an intensifying Russia-Pakistan relations, and the 4 attack helicopters that Ambassador Lamba referred to. Of course, the 4 attack helicopters have been talked about for the last 3 years. They still haven't been delivered. But the way they have been repeated in our press, one would think there were 150 attack helicopters, not 4, because it's been repeated so many times. Anyway, but added to this, of course, again, Mr. Lamba referred to it, are the Russian dalliance with the Taliban, the Russia, China, Pakistan talks in Moscow about Afghanistan, where they talked about reaching out elements of the Taliban. Now this is obviously a deviation from the earlier stand of unequivocal support for the Afghan national government in its national reconciliation efforts. The China embrace was something, is also something that was of great concern, is of great concern, which includes the strengthening of the strategic partnership, advanced sale of advanced military technologies with China. Russia was seen to have supported China in its stand on the permanent court of arbitration decision on the South China Sea, and of course President Putin was the most respected principal guest at China's Belt and Road Forum, which India boycotted. But if one is to look at this a little bit more carefully, if you look at Russia-China relations, I mean, there is a very strong logic for Russia-China relations which nobody can actually deny. They have a 4,000 plus kilometer border. The Chinese appetite for raw material, natural resources and military technologies match Russia's strength. And when the sanctions were announced, China's support became very important to Russia as the other member and permanent member of the UN Security Council. Its support became important. In terms of economic sanctions, the China route to beat the economic sanctions became very important. So the Russia-China embrace became much stronger during this period of time, perhaps much stronger than what Russia wanted. Because if you look at China-Russia relations, it has the same kind of dynamics in a different way as India-China relations. You have flourishing trade and investment relations, but you always have the underlying undercurrent of strategic, or the undercurrent that you might be strategic adversaries in the future. And that's not something that Russia has forgotten through this period of time. If Putin set out to make Russia great again, it's not on the coattails of China. Russia is not going to become great on the coattails of China. And that is something in the long term we have to understand, that there is a natural Russian urge to steer clear of a total embrace of China. And if you look at how Russia has actually leveraged its relationships with other countries in the region, with Vietnam, it has strong strategic links with Vietnam. It has in fact entered into hydrocarbon projects with Vietnam, which will eventually work in the disputed areas in the South China Sea. It has tried to retrieve the relationship with Japan, another country with relations with China. It has invited Japanese investment into the Russian Far East, which it has never done for China. It talks about Japan being party to an Asia-Pacific peace architecture, part of an Asia-Pacific peace architecture. Is not something that China would particularly appreciate. And even if you look at the South China Sea, Russia has actually taken a neutral position. It says that the countries have to resolve this issue among themselves. And when President Putin supported China on the PCA, he made a very clever distinction. He said, I support China in the stand that a decision taken without China being heard cannot be the right decision. He did not say that I support China on the South China Sea. And if you look at the Belt and Road initiative also, what he said at the Belt and Road Forum is that, look, this project has to be developed in a way that is sensitive to national development interests and in a transparent manner, which is really something like what we are saying. So there are nuances in what Russia is doing with China. Now, similarly, if you look at Russia's relations with Afghanistan and Pakistan, you have to look at it in the prism of Russia's relations with the West. There is embarrassing America in Afghanistan is an important objective. I think these are tactical. Similarly, if you see what Russia is doing with Pakistan, now a certain level of political and economic relations with Pakistan is something that obviously Russia wants to do. Pakistan is an important country in this region. Secondly, Pakistan's intermediary role perhaps in developing links to the Taliban is an important consideration. Pakistan's role in the Islamic world and eventual Russian activity in West Asia is also an important consideration. So there are these various motives behind Russia's development of relations, and that's not something that you can completely wish away. And again, as Ambassador Lamba said, in today's world, you are not talking about an exclusivity of relations. Strategic partnership is defined by how much it takes care of your core political, economic, and security concerns. Now, how you do that, how you reconcile it, is through bilateral talks, through these relations of trust. Now, you know, the Prime Minister had hours and hours of one-to-one meetings with President Putin. And then he comes out and says that, look, we share perspectives on Afghanistan. It's not possible to define how exactly you work out how you're going to look after each other's interests, nor can you do this in public. But you have to accept that if a Prime Minister says that we share our perspectives on Afghanistan, that they have worked out something. If you do not agree, then you do not mention it. If you mention something, then you have to accept that that mention means something. You know, for example, in the 2016 joint statement with America, Afghanistan was not mentioned at all, because we could not agree on certain formulations on Afghanistan. I'm talking about Indo-US statement. So we have to accept that there are under the surface discussions which settle issues which are on the surface problematic. So is Russia turning away from India? Which is the last question that I asked there. I think there is no indication that Russia is turning away from India. If Russia wants to be a great power, India is an important element in a multipolar world. If you have to maintain a balance between in your relations with China, India is important. If you want to balance India-US relations, India-China relations, Russia-India relations are important. And these are long-term perspectives which you can see playing out. And you can see that in the way in which Russia has actually been dealing with India in the recent past. In the State of the Union address that President Putin gave to his parliament last year, he specifically singled out Russia and India and the strategic partnership with India. In the summit in St. Petersburg, that effusive cordiality that he showed, he went out of his way to praise India's independence, India's sovereignty, Prime Minister Modi's strength, Prime Minister Modi's sagacity. The number of indications where they are, and then the latest example is, of course, when the Pakistani Foreign Office spokesman said something about Russia being welcome as a mediator between India and Pakistan. They talked about a reported offer by President Putin to Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif at the ACO summit. The same day, the Russian Foreign Ministry issued a press statement saying that Russia has no intention of mediation. The dispute between India and Pakistan has to be settled in accordance with the Shimla Agreement and the Lahore Declaration of 1999. I don't know when was the last time even India mentioned the Lahore Declaration of 1999. But anyway, so the idea was they wanted to show, this was an effort to show that we remain sensitive to your interests. This is something that we need to take on board. I think I will, yes, I have, I think 5 more minutes. Okay. Thank you. Because I'm finishing. Why Russia? Therefore, now we need to look at it from our perspective. Is Russia that important to us? Why is Russia so important to us? I think I've already talked about a shared strategic outlook with common challenges. There are challenges and outlook in the longer term which bring India and Russia together, and which from our perspective, we also need to balance our relations with the US, the relations with China. We need, if you are looking at a multipolar world, you're looking at a balanced set of relationships, and Russia is very important in that. Political support. I mentioned one of the narratives which says that, we are now strong enough, we have an international profile, and we don't need Russia's political support. Well, I'm sorry, we are still not members of the UN Security Council, permanent members of the UN Security Council. We would not get accepted by the nuclear suppliers group. I think we need to understand some of our limitations, and I think we need to understand the need for support of great powers outside. Russia does remain a permanent member of the UN Security Council, and I think we need to recognize that. And then we talk about defense cooperation. Now, defense cooperation has dimensions which only a part of it is on the surface. So much of it is under the surface because so much of it has to be secret. But even if you look at what is outside, can you imagine an arrangement like what we have got for BrahMos with any other country? Not in the immediate future, certainly. INS Vikramaditya, this famous aircraft carrier Goshko, which was refocused. So much has been said about it, you know. The Russians said they give it to us for 500 million, finally it cost 2 billion, so much, so difficult. But listen, was there anybody else who was going to give you a an aircraft carrier? No. If you had bought a new aircraft carrier, supposing somebody was willing to sell it to you, how much would it have cost you? $6 to $7 billion. So what are we talking about? We're talking about what we got from somebody which we could not get from anywhere else, and it's still cheaper than what we could have got from anywhere else if they were willing to give it to us. So one needs to understand this. Do you know anyone who would have leased a nuclear submarine to us at a time when Russia did it, or even today? The S-400 air defense system is the state-of-the-art system, and we are now acquiring it from Russia. So we need to keep this in mind. We need to keep in mind that there are defense technologies we get from Russia, and there are a number of others which I cannot talk about, we cannot talk about. So we need to keep this in mind. We need to keep in mind that even if you are tomorrow going to diversify your defense acquisitions, this is the standard that you are going to show to others. But with 60 to 70% of our military equipment, Russian or Soviet, it's going to be a long time before you can actually diversify. So it's a very strong argument for us to continue to keep the Russian relationship strong. And as I said, nuclear power, Russia is the only country today which is collaborating in nuclear power. And Russia's nuclear power collaboration comes with actually a soft loan which is very attractive. Hydrocarbons, our investments speak for themselves, and I think there is considerable scope. And other natural resources, we have a lot of promise in economic cooperation with Russia. Template for other relationships, I've already sort of touched on this. What is to be done is what Lenin asked once, a long time ago. But in the current situation, we need to develop the economic pillar much more strongly. The INSPC I talked about, you know, our business has hesitated to go into Russia because they're afraid about sanctions. Actually, sanctions have not affected much of the world dealing with Russia. Even European countries have entered Russia through the Middle East and through China comfortably. So we need to be a little bit more inventive. Russia has recently been particularly welcoming. President Putin told our business community that, look, whatever you want, we'll do for you. We are willing to consider tax holidays. We are willing to consider investment incentives. We need to take advantage of that because ultimately, a strategic partnership has to be strong in multiple pillars. Defense and nuclear alone cannot sustain a partnership in the long term. So this is something that we need to be doing. We need to be innovative in how we collaborate with Russia and third countries. For example, you know, you have Chabahar and Chabahar-Zaidam Railway. These are important initiatives, as important for Russia as it is for us, as strategically important for Russia as for us. Why don't we get Russia into co-invest in it, for example? And then new alignment, well, this is something very new. You see now after the Trump administration, the way politics is developing in Europe, politics is developing in the Middle East. I think there are opportunities for India, and there are opportunities for India-Russia in these developments. I will leave that to a discussion and question and answers. And I will end here now. Of course, this will be north-south transport corridor. Yeah, you know, when you were a kid, when you were asked to write essays, you would say, you know, my dog, and then you end up, you finally wonder how to end, and you say, I like my dog very much. This is something like that, and just a summary of what we've said already about the relationship. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Raman. You know, I think he has given an overall perspective and given you more than what I had expected. is not restricted himself only to bilateral relations, but given you Russia's position in the last 20 years and how international events have affected them also. So the next part of our program is an interaction between the two of us. So I'll try to wear the hat before I start interaction with you. So on behalf of all of you, I'll take a few questions in this and ask him based on what he had said. You know, you said that the embrace from China is more than what Russia wanted. As a student of history, my mind goes to the 17th century when there was the first contact between the two countries, when Russia started moving from the Urals to the Pacific. 18th century, they reached the Amur River and Missouri and Manchuria, and China called them unequal treaties. 50s of the 20th century, differences. 60s, I arrived in Moscow on my first posting, and I remember the conflict between the two countries on the Ussuri River. 70s, US and China getting together. 80s, Gorbachev trying to bring change. 90s, sea change starts. 2004, 2001, the strategic partnership, Article 5 and 8, one China and not getting, and settling of the border dispute in 2004. Having said that, you say that their embrace is more than, how would you put it? That's what I would, is that it's more than what Russia wanted. Are you saying to what I originally said that they wouldn't like to be a junior partner?
Yes, sir. I would like to point out one aspect where Russia has been very careful with China, which is in the sale of military technologies. Now, there are military sales that Russia makes to China, but if you look at it, they would never sell to China the latest military technologies, and there are areas of offensive weaponry which Russia will not sell to China, because that realization that you are a strategic adversary of the future is there. The other element that Russia is very careful about, and I did mention it in a different context, Chinese presence in the Russian Far East. Russia is very sensitive about Chinese investment, and even at a time when it was desperate for investment during this brief sanctions period of 2014-15, it was very careful about the investments that it would receive from China. In fact, the bonanza opened up for our hydrocarbon companies because Russia aggressively came to us and said, will you please invest here? It's not something that they were doing before. You remember the time of the early 2000s when Russia was being very pricey about the investment in the hydrocarbon sector. But now, in this Franco-Neft field, we are being given 49%. So, all of this, there is this underlying reticence about China that remains on, which is under the very, very effusive strategic partnership, as I said, and this, like our strategic partnership, their strategic partnership also keeps adding adjectives as you go along, and the embraces between Xi Jinping and President Putin get warmer as you go along. But it's the same with India. You have flourishing trade and investment relations, and you then have the strategic diversity. I think that balance is something that President Putin wants to maintain. At that time in 2014, they probably had to go much closer than they signed. For example, they signed this gas pipeline deal, which was a very demonstrative $30 billion deal. I don't think it's ever going to take off. But it happened at that time. It was a great demonstration of Russian-Chinese friendship. Russian-Chinese friendship is a great thing to show to the West as far as Russia is concerned. It's a great thing to also show to others, saying that, look, this is what we'll do if you don't do that. But I think there is that underlying impulse.
Well, I thank you for clarifying it, but all I'll say before I move to the next question is that the embrace does have an impact on us, and we have to carefully analyze it. And it is not the only embrace that has an impact on us. And I don't think so we can blame the other two countries for what it is. It is our job to see that we protect our national interest. My next question is on what you mentioned on Afghanistan. You said that Russia is looking at the prism of the West. Now, I'm looking at these conclusions, which have happily been left. Considering that, I would also like them to look at prism of friends like India. You know, after all, India and Russia have worked closely in Afghanistan, and as you know, I led the Indian delegation to the Bonn Conference and worked very closely with Russia, and that's how the agreement, Russia and India working together, was one reason of it. So I hope that while they're looking at the prism of the West, eventually they would also keep in mind the prism of friends. You know, now that's a question to which I know we probably have a joint desire, but maybe if you can clarify something to the audience on that.
I can only say on this subject that the subject of Afghanistan has figured very intensively in closed-door conversations between India and Russia. As you know, our NSA went to Russia in January this year. It again went in May. It's very unusual for the NSA to make two trips so close to each other to one country. And he told me, in fact, in January he spent 6 hours with the National Security Advisor of Russia discussing our...
When we were invited there to a conference.
After that we were invited. But 6 hours they spent on dealing entirely with our neighborhood. When the Prime Minister met President Putin, again the discussion, the tete-a-tete of 2 hours plus which took place, was supposed to be on our neighborhood. One can only expect from the, or one can only deduce from the public statements thereafter, that you have worked out arrangements such that what Russia does in Afghanistan does not affect your interests. And it's very difficult to really talk about what exactly that would have happened. But I would say tactically, whatever Russia does tactically, in the long run, the Taliban government is not in Russia's interest as much as it is not in our interest. And I think that is something that Russia accepts as well. So now this is a matter of, again, I think that if Russia-US relations change for the better, nobody knows, I mean, it depends on which day of the week you're talking about. But if they improve, that might change Russia's attitude in Afghanistan as well. But it's a fact from 2015 onwards. When I was in Moscow, the National Security Council used to constantly talk about the Western effort to try to infiltrate drugs and terrorists into Russia through Central Asia. You know, it's a porous border with Pakistan. So I think the jury is out. We need to wait and see how it develops.
Well, we do hope that the four-party dialogue doesn't affect us adversely, which on paper it appears it will. And now I move into my last question before I ask you. You refer to BrahMos. You know, at that time one couldn't speak, but now I can tell you that I don't like champagne in the morning, but it was early morning that I signed the agreement in a closed room with a glass of champagne with the Russian leader and the BrahMos thing. And then reported to the then scientific advisor to Raksha Mantri, who later became the President of India, that the agreement had been signed. But at that time, our hope was that BrahMos would be inducted by both Russia and India in their army. We have done it, they haven't. I can understand they have more sophisticated equipment, but I think that I was told, and I am not aware of all detail, is coming in the way of us selling it to the, selling more of it to the outside world. Would you have any comments on that?
I think we have made progress with Russia in agreeing, with Russia agreeing to BrahMos being sold to third countries. Now, whether BrahMos will be inducted in the Russian armed forces, I think is very unlikely. They have also some, you can't call them strange. There is one law in Russia that their armed forces cannot induct whole equipment manufactured outside Russia. This is something that they keep throwing at us whenever we talk about various. Now, in fact, when you talk about this FGFA, that is how you got over this idea, because FGFA is going to be jointly manufactured. So, I don't know. Anyway, there are various other reasons. I think there is pride, there are various other reasons. But the bottom line is that we might get an agreement to export BrahMos into third countries. But today, BrahMos is also, I think, developing for our armed forces and now for all three services. So it's busy. So it's busy doing.
And also third countries are.
And third countries are interested.
Well, I think you made a very important point of that the Russians don't induct anything manufactured outside, whereas unfortunately we have only outside equipment. So I think before I ask the audience to take, I think we expressly hope that one day we would be using more of our own equipment than imported equipment. Well, now comes the most important part. All of you, please, while asking questions, be brief the questions and do identify yourself. And I will try to take as many as possible. One hand is up, Mr. Surendra Kumar, and then followed by Ram. And well, strangely enough, General, your hand didn't come first. Normally you come first. Now it's third. And I will now try to see all the people who...
Sir, you have been talking about embraces. So let me ask a fundamental question. How many times have Prime Minister Modi hugged President Putin? And whose embrace is tighter? Putin's embrace or Trump's embrace? Second question is that there is as you know, the probe is going on in the US. Russia tried to influence the election results in USA. Has Russia or earlier Soviet Union ever tried to influence the results in India? Thank you.
What was the last part of what you said?
There is a probe going on in US.
Yes.
I think has Russia earlier Soviet Union ever tried, Soviet Union earlier Russia, ever tried to influence the results in election in India?
You know, we are taking 3 or 4 questions together.
Thank you. Thank you for a very good talk, Raghavan, and also for bringing
Raghavan to Raghavan.
How we should not look at external relationships in terms of a zero-sum game or being mutually exclusive. But my comment or question really is about when you say that Russian policy, we have to see also the tactical aspect in it where it comes to Afghanistan and Pakistan. Now that is so, but I think we also have to acknowledge, at least to my mind, that Russian policy is much more attuned to the changes which have taken place, especially in Pakistan, than we would like to acknowledge. And I say this for 2 reasons. Firstly, I think Zarbayas had a far more profound impact on Russian and Chinese assessments of Pakistan than we are prepared to concede. And it gave them a certain understanding of what the Pakistan army is capable of doing within its own country, which they were not expecting. And from that have followed a number of consequences, both for China-Pakistan relations and China and Russia-Pakistan relations. Secondly, of course, the Russians see the Americans, if not withdrawing, certainly disengaging from Afghanistan, and that opens opportunities for them which they feel they have been shut out of from by the Americans. And now for them to get back into Afghanistan, the relationship with Pakistan is vital. I think these 2 aspects are more than just tactical, and they are going to remain with us for a long time, and we have to really acknowledge them and see it also in terms of Russia's own, as you said, their own understanding of Pakistan is quite distinct from just seeing Pakistan through an Indian prism.
General?
Thank you. He's partially touched on it. I'll focus on 2 things of your slide. Is Russia turning away, and then you talked of the Russia-China balance. actually pre-2014 and post, you try to bring out how there has been a resurgence. If you ask me on defense cooperation, where is the resurgence? In my 40 years, I've only fought 4 wars, all with Soviet equipment. So the defense cooperation is a continuing thing. There is no such major surge. But my question is, this perception that Ambassador Lamba talked about, you talked about, and all of us talk about, after hearing you, it seems that what Russia and India are doing is good. But we all don't hear you. This is only this hall. This perception that they are going more towards Pakistan, not doing enough as far as India is concerned, how do we get over it? Diplomacy is one answer. Is the media is playing up what Raghavan here talked about India, Pakistan. So we must do something on this because in a democracy, perception matters. Thank you, Chair.
One more question on the first session.
Yeah, thank you very much, and Raghavan, thank you very much for your, I think, a very valiant effort that you have made to try to correct perceptions, but I think it's going to really take a long time, as it has been said, because I think more than arguments like this, possibly it is action that people are able to see on the ground, because there are over the last 1.5 years, I agree with you that in St. Petersburg things have we have tried to set things right in terms of the body language, in terms of the chemistry, and in terms of the results what has come out in the joint statement. But before that, what happened in Goa, what happened in December as far as the meeting between the 3 countries on Afghanistan, I think that has created a large number of doubts in the minds of people. But coming to specifics, and I'll ask 2 or 3 simple questions, and if you could give your assessment. This very close Russia-China relations, do you think Russia will be able to influence China in any way on India's membership of the NSG? Do you think they'll be able to speak to them? Do you think they'll be able to make this thing move forward? On CPEC, what is the view of Russia? Because immediately after that, it was reported that Russia itself is eager to become a part of CPEC. On OBOR and EEU, they have said that they would like to see some synergy, and if that comes about, then of course EEU becomes, of course the structures are quite different. And how will this synergy be established? The last question on this, you've said INSTC, that has great prospect, that has great potential, but now, with the possibility of Iran again becoming a sort of a pariah state as far as international collaborations work is concerned, how do you think INSTC and also Chabahar, how will they be able to move forward? Thank you.
I'll request you now to answer these questions, and then we'll take the next note.
I think the easiest question is whose hug is stronger. I think neither President Putin nor President Trump is a natural hugger.
Well said.
So, but I must say that in St. Petersburg, I think this is the first recorded hug of Prime Minister Modi with President Putin, in spite of the many summits. I don't recall a hug in the past. So you can say that that's a progress. The other question is also easy about Russian interference in election. Look, as far as hacking is concerned, I don't think any country worth its name does not hack into correspondence with any other country. And if you have the cyber tools, you will use them, and you will use them with friend and adversary alike. And I think all countries do it. Everybody has forgotten this great controversy that took place about the Americans snooping on German and French politicians, not that far back in time. So I think that's a non-issue. It's a kind of a hook on which to hang your other problems. So anyway, I'll just stop with that. Now, Russia's engagement with Pakistan we're talking about. Yes, see, the bottom line is that for a number of reasons, Russia will develop relations with Pakistan. My only argument is against what people say that Russia is playing a China-Pakistan game in Afghanistan, for example. I don't think Russia is playing anybody's game except its own game. And eventually, its own game, we have to deal with Russia's game in Afghanistan and see whether we can, and also Russia's relations with Pakistan up to a point, as Mr. Lamba said, you cannot claim exclusivity. You don't give that exclusivity. So you need to just ensure that your dialogue keeps that within the framework of your own, protecting your own strategic interests. I mean, that's all that you can really ask for. Then said about resurgence in defense cooperation. Actually, the resurgence in defense cooperation is compared to a slackening in the period from 2009 to 2014 when no decisions were taken here, not necessarily only on Russia, but on many other subjects as well. So, when we talk about, and certainly if you look at this period, 2014 to 2017, the speed in processing of defense projects has been remarkable in comparison to the past. And that's something that is quite evident. So, while the relationship is supposed to be in the public mind going downhill, the speed of processing of defense projects and in very sensitive projects, and once again, as I said, many things we cannot talk about, but in certain very sensitive areas, we've made great progress in the last few years. So it's a positive step. Correction of perceptions, well, I think this is also an attempt to correct perception. But I do not know how perceptions can be corrected because we are subjected to information about Russia which is coming, which is bombarding us from the Western media, which is uniformly negative. And we consciously or subconsciously buy into this, and we buy this. And things are repeated which are not true. As I said, four attack helicopters to Pakistan, by now in the public mind is 150 helicopters, because every few months you publish it as though it's some news subject. Ambassador Sajjana's question, can Russia influence China on the NSG? We don't want Russia to influence China on the NSG. Why? In fact, I frankly cannot understand why we are so desperate to join the NSG, because the NSG, we already have a 2008 waiver, which gives us everything that you want on the nuclear supplier table. And today, if you persuade China to accept India, you have to, China will say Pakistan has to come in. No, today, India's entry into energy is like giving a free invitation to Pakistan to enter energy. Frankly, I don't think that it's an important subject at all. On CPEC, again, you see, this shows how perceptions endure. The Pakistani press talked about how Russia is interested to join CPEC. The Russian Foreign Ministry issued a denial immediately, which was not carried anywhere, saying that, look, we are not interested in CPEC. We have not expressed interest. They didn't say we're not interested in CPEC. But the point is that Russia officially will not say that we will support CPEC. But if Russian companies go and participate in projects of CPEC, by the way, it was pointed out to me, we have in the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank approved projects which are part of CPEC. They are not in Gilgit-Baltistan, that's all right. But you know, the whole transport corridor, there are parts of the transport corridor which are inside Pakistan which we have also accepted. The BRICS Bank will also approve projects there. So you can say you have joined CPEC. No, the one thing is making a political statement, the other thing is involving yourself in commercial decisions. About OBOR and EAU, this is again a very peculiar thing. How does an economic union actually cooperate with the belt? You know, EAU is an economic union. SREB, which is the Silk Road Economic Belt, is a project. So actually it is not very clear. And look, the Russians are also quite circumspect about OBOR because it comes into their backyard. Eventually, that is basically extending Chinese influence in an area which Russia has considered its backyard. So Russia will be careful while paying lip service to it by saying, it's a great idea, this, that, and the other. I think we have to see how it unfolds, how the cooperation unfolds. INSTC potential, I think INSTC potential we have to pursue. Iran, you say is becoming a pariah state. I think the US is acting against Iran. Today, Europe is very much against sidelining Iran to the extent that the international community did before. And as long as that nuclear deal lasts, you cannot really shut out Iran as totally as you did before. And I think we, as a country with an independent foreign policy, should pursue Chabahar, and Chabahar, by the way, in my view, is far more important than Bandar Abbas. It's a deepwater port, the port with greater potential. Bandar Abbas is choked, and if you really want to open up the North-South transport corridor, whether it is to Central Asia or it is to Russia, and by the way, it opens up all the Southeast Asia to Europe, we need to go to act more quickly on Chabahar and the Chabahar-Zaidan railway line. Because if you do not do only Chabahar and don't do the Chabahar-Zaidan railway line, you are actually helping the Chinese who have a petrochemical complex near Chabahar. You need to be building this link. And that I think is something that we should do, and I think there is a window for us to do it. I don't think we have to be afraid of this stuff.
You had asked. No, he had asked first. Yes, you next talking.
Thank you, sir. I'm Gulshan Sachdeva from JNU. You have rightly said that a lot of things are happening between India and Russia, but still the narrative is negative. But why this narrative is negative? Is it because of our foreign policy, which is becoming too much Pakistan-centric? Because if tomorrow there are a couple of statements coming from Russia negative about Pakistan, suddenly I think the narrative is going to change. Is it what is really affecting our relations with all major powers? That's a question for you. And second question I have for Ambassador Lama. You said, there are differences about Taliban between India and Russia. How to deal with Taliban? Could you just elaborate a little bit more? What are those differences? What is our position on Taliban and what is their position?
Okay. Both of you, please.
On Russia-China, you rightly said that apparently there may be bonhomie, but Russians are very guarded and cautious. But what worries me is the fact that in some of the popular opinion surveys in Russia about friends and foes, most of the Russians count China as a friend now, whereas India doesn't figure very highly in the list of friends. So China is a friend number one perhaps now. India doesn't figure very highly. Also, after 2014, before that, Russians were not very keen to transfer technology. But if I'm not correct, Sukhoi technology is being now transferred by Russia to China. Is it true? I don't know. I would like to know. About Russia-India cooperation in third countries, is there any prospect for us to come together in Iran in certain ways apart from INSTC? And what about Vietnam? You said Russia is investing in oil exploration in South China Sea. We also had some such proposal project, I don't remember. So any prospect of us coming together in Vietnam also or in other third countries? Regarding Chabahar, there were also reports that the Chinese are interested in Chabahar and the Iranians are interested in CPEC. I don't know. Any comments on that?
Yes.
My name is R.P. Lahiri. I have got a very peculiar understanding from my friends from Iran. They say quite often these Russian planes just get burst or destroyed. I mean, they are very poor quality, which I understand from them. And you have
Can you repeat what you said?
See, my friend in Iran, they said these transport planes or the civilian planes, they just, got burst out, all these things. Because their technology is very poor.
Russian technology?
Yeah, especially in the aviation areas, in the plane manufacturing and all that. That is what is the ground reality as told by me, the people who lives there, who faces it day by day. Now, and this same understanding I had in other areas also. They were great at 50 years back, not today. But you have made them very high in technology areas and all, which is the real truth. Are they technological high, or for our, we have to tell them because of the diplomatic reasons and all that, which is the truth.
I think I missed one person here. Anyone else who had raised his hand earlier? No. Oh, you, yes. Please. So this will be the last question. Oh, you will be the last then. Two more. Yes.
Thank you for an insightful presentation, sir. I have one comment and a question. So, as you mentioned that this Russia-China embrace. So, what I see is that when Russia leases a nuclear submarine to India, it's a tactical attempt to balance China. So, this is what I believe. But my problem lies in the fact that the current edge that Russia has is the transfer of critical technology, which India does not have with anyone else. What if that changes in the next 5 years? So, what then is the scenario?
Can you ask your question so that we are already coming? Yes, the last.
My name is Nalin Kohli. So my question is that when it comes to defense cooperation with US, there is a lot of private sector involvement there. And we see opportunities in Russia. There are some critical technologies, there's some intellectual property which we can build around. Do you see any possibility this will also do two things which you mentioned in your talk? One is the economic pillar gets strengthened, and secondly the spares part particularly. Some of it can be taken up maybe even by our small and medium enterprises in defense. I would like to know your comments. Thank you.
Ambassador Raghavan will reply to all the questions, including Mr. Gulshan Sajeva's question on Taliban.
You asked about perceptions, and is it because of our foreign policy? Now, the foreign policy is what we have been doing. The perceptions is what perhaps we have not been able to manage. And particularly about Pakistan, actually sensationalism sells. So when Russia is doing something with Pakistan that you do not like, it comes in the media. Like, for example, I tell you, when Pakistan talked about third party with Russian mediation, I mentioned this, that the Russian Foreign Ministry said that you must resolve your problems by writing the Shimla Agreement or the Lahore Declaration. That did not get much play in the Indian media. So, I agree that there is a perception problem. I agree that there is a management of perception that we have to do. I don't have any real answers as to how we can do it, but we do need to do it because we do have as sharp a divergence as the reality of India-Russia relations and the public perception you do not have in any of our other relationships. And I think we need to tackle that. Transfer of technologies to China. Look, I must tell you, when I was in Russia, I actually visited, I can't tell you which factories and what particular, but I have visited factories where I was shown what we are getting and what China is getting. To make the point that we are selling to you something much more than what we are selling to China. And of course, as a matter of due diligence, when you are negotiating with Russia for any military platform, you have to ensure that what you are getting is superior to what China is likely to get. And that is something that you have to do. It's a matter of due diligence that you have to do all the time when you are negotiating military. Now, working with third countries, it's something that we have not actually pursued with Russia as much as we could. Now, I'm sure that if you invited Russia to invest in the Chabahar-Zaidan railway line, Russia will be interested and Russia will take it up. Now, we have this perception Russia doesn't have money. They've just put $13 billion into your hydrocarbon industry, cashed out. Russia has the money, we can find the money for investment. But we have to work with them. We can work with them, for example, in Bangladesh on the nuclear power plant that they're doing. We can work with Russia to set up enterprises that can service Russian military equipment which they have sold in our neighborhood, starting from Egypt up to Vietnam. So there are projects that we can take up with Russia, but we have to also show some innovation, some inventiveness, step out of the box, so does Russia have to do. But this is something that we do need to do to keep our relationship vibrant. Now, technology, Chinese interest in Chabahar, Chinese are interested in Chabahar. Chinese have a petrochemical complex actually, well developed near Chabahar. And Iran will, if India slows down in implementation, Iran will show China to India. Iran will show India to China. There is no reason why it shouldn't. And whether it participates in CPEC or not is not a question that one can answer, but if it sees commercial advantage from it, it will. Why should Iran not participate in CPEC? Iran's sovereignty is not affected by CPEC. Is Russian technology, now I heard that this is a very unique statement that someone made there about Russia's aviation technology being weak. The aerospace industry is one of Russia's greatest strengths and has been one of Russia's greatest strengths for a long time. There was a slack in the military industrial complex in the 1990s because of various reasons. But actually Russia's armaments technology is something that the US acknowledges even today. And in Syria operations, when it fired all those missiles from the sea across countries into Syria, it was not so much required for the war in Syria. It was to demonstrate to the world that we have the technologies, we have precision-guided missiles which can go across countries to hit the target. So aerospace technology is something that Russia is very good at. And it's something that we have to accept, and it's something the world accepts actually. Now, you asked this question about critical technologies, and I think the point of your question was that 5 years later, if Russia doesn't transfer critical technologies to us. No, look, our whole effort is for other countries to transfer critical technologies to us, but it is not happening. We started this defense technology initiative with America in a different name in 2000, and then now again in 2011, I think it was that DTTI started. But we are not getting cutting-edge technologies from the US, whether it is because of interagency processes or congressional approvals or whatever other reason, or private industry not wanting to part with technologies to potential competitors. The point is that you have to avail of the critical technologies that you can get from Russia, and you should be able to show it to others, saying that, look, this is the level of technology I'm getting, can you match it? You use this to leverage technological purchases from other countries. And the reason that we should not lose our Russia relationship is that we are getting these critical technologies from Russia, which we are not getting from anywhere else. Now, you had this question about private sector being involved. This is the effort that has started over the last couple of years, and it is making some progress. Where we're trying to force Russia to come to deal with our private sector, to set up joint ventures that can manufacture components, that can manufacture sub-assemblies, that can set up repair and maintenance workshops, which will deal with our spares problem which we've always had. So it is an effort that is ongoing, and which I think, look, our other relationships have also forced Russia to be more reasonable in the way it deals with us. That's also something that we should recognize. That the fear of India going into, say, US arms or other Western arms is also making Russia a bit more reasonable in these particular areas, which is helping us in our defense cooperation. The last question is the question about Taliban. Now, what was the question? Can you repeat it?
No, my question was that just to get slightly more clarification from person like Ambassador Nava, what are really differences dealing with Taliban, Indian perception, Indian positions as well as Russia? Which are the differences?
Well, I think we will leave that for another subject matter, but what I say is it's very difficult to negotiate with a group which hasn't even clarified who they are. Where there's a small group that emerges in Qatar, there's a small group that emerges at times in Kabul, but they are controlled from another neighboring country. So it's very difficult to talk to them as a group. So that's what we said, is they do not represent Afghanistan. I leave it at that. And now to conclude, I would just say 3 points. 1, India-Russia friendship is time-tested and unique. 2, there have been some changes observed of late. The negative aspects have been exaggerated, but we should not ignore them, and that is the profession of both diplomats and journalists and others. And third is to thank Ambassador Raghavan for a very lucid and detailed talk and for the manner in which he answered all the questions. And with that, to thank all of you for coming here this morning. Thank you.